The Red Sea at 11:44 p.m. is dark in a way that open ocean is never dark in peacetime. No commercial traffic within 40 nautical miles. The shipping lanes that had carried 12% of global trade through this corridor 6 months ago were now empty. Rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope at an additional 14 days and $3 million per transit. A cost the insurance markets had decided was preferable to the alternative. The water the destroyer was transiting had been declared a high-risk zone by every major maritime insurer on the planet. The crew had been in this zone for 9 days. The ship is 210 nautical miles southwest of Hodeidah, 190 nautical miles northwest of Aden, holding a patrol sector that protects the approach corridor for a multinational logistics convoy that passed through 12 hours earlier. The convoy is gone. The destroyer remains. Patrol continuation orders. Someone in a command structure had decided the corridor needed coverage through the following morning, and the destroyer was the available asset. The SPY-6 radar picture at 11:44 p.m. is clean. That means nothing in this sector. The contact that neutralized a vessel in this corridor 14 weeks ago appeared on radar with 38 seconds of warning. The watch team does not find the clean picture reassuring. The watch team finds the clean picture something to watch. At 11:44 p.m., the radar picture changes. 10 contacts, bearing 042, range 94 kilometers, altitude 600 meters, stabilizing, speed 195 kilometers per hour, radar cross-section 0.03 square meters per contact, consistent with Shahed-136 airframe, fixed-wing one-way attack platform, GPS with terminal electro-optical seeker, 40-kilogram fragmentation warhead. Launched from the Yemeni coast, a trajectory consistent with a launch point 30 to 40 kilometers inland from the coast, from a position that had changed since the last strike attempt 6 weeks earlier. 10 contacts. The TAO looked at the number and processed it differently than he would have processed 40 or 60. 10 was manageable. 10 was well inside the rated engagement capacity of the outer ring. He had 8 SM-6 cells and 24 SM-2 cells. 10 contacts were a standard engagement drill with margin to spare. The TAO had been in this sector for 9 days and had read every engagement report from this theater for the past 11 months. He had read 43 separate engagement reports. He looked at 10 contacts and thought about what 10 contacts meant in this theater, in this context, at this hour. Track all 10. Do not engage yet. I want a full track file on each before we authorize weapons release. How long to SM-6 range? 11 minutes, sir. We wait. And somebody tell me if anything else comes off that coast. Running count. 11:44 p.m., second 0, 10 contacts, bearing 042, range 94 kilometers, 195 kilometers per hour. VLS, SM-6 times 8, SM-2 times 24, ESSM times 32, RAM 21, CIWS fore and aft 100%, engagement hold, TAO discretion. The E-2 Hawkeye, operating 180 kilometers to the southwest, had been monitoring the Yemeni coast for 6 hours. Its radar picture, relayed through Link 16, painted a more detailed picture of the launch area than the destroyer's own sensors could provide at this range. The Hawkeye crew had tracked the 10 contacts from the moment they appeared over the ridgeline 38 kilometers inland. The track files were clean. All 10 were consistent with Shahed-136 profile. All 10 had launched within a 90-second window from approximately the same grid. All 10 were on the same approach bearing. That uniformity was the data point the TAO was looking for and did not want to find. 43 engagement reports. In 11 months of Houthi one-way UAV operations against U.S. and partner naval assets in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, The engagement that had inflicted the most damage had not been the largest salvo. It had been a sequenced salvo. 3 waves of platforms launched at timed intervals, designed so that each subsequent wave arrived when the previous wave had exhausted a specific defensive layer. The first wave drained the outer ring. The second wave faced only the middle ring. The third wave arrived when the middle ring was depleted, carrying the actual warheads, facing only CIWS. The design exploited a fundamental arithmetic of layered defense. The outer ring was the most expensive layer to operate and the most finite. SM-6 at $2.1 million and SM-2 at $1.2 million were not weapons that a ship carried in unlimited quantities. The VLS cells were 96 in total, but only a fraction were loaded with anti-air interceptors. Every outer ring round expended against a decoy or a low-priority contact was a round unavailable for whatever came after it. The adversary's designers had understood this. They had built a salvo architecture around it. 10 contacts, same bearing, same altitude profile, same speed, all launched within 90 seconds. XO. What's the launch pattern on the previous sequenced engagement, the one in March? The answer came in 12 seconds. First wave, 10 platforms. Second wave, 10 platforms, launched 8 minutes after first wave. Third wave, 10 platforms, launched 8 minutes after second wave. Intervals calculated so each wave reaches engagement range as the previous wave is being cleared. The TIA was quiet for 4 seconds. Stand by on SM-6. SM-2 on the first wave when it crosses 30 kilometers. ESSM in reserve. I want a full radar sweep of the coastal launch area every 30 seconds from now. If there's a second wave behind this one, I want to know while we're still shooting the first. The decision had a cost. Releasing SM-6 against 10 platforms that might be a feint would exhaust his long-range inventory before a genuine second wave arrived. Holding SM-6 and engaging with SM-2 would preserve the outer ring. But SM-2 had a 40-kilometer engagement range versus SM-6's 150-plus, meaning the contacts would be closer before engagement and the engagement timeline would be tighter. He was betting that there was a second wave and that it would arrive carrying something more dangerous than the first. He was betting the decision on 11 months of pattern analysis and a uniform launch profile that looked deliberate rather than opportunistic. If he was wrong, he had used SM-2 inventory against a single wave of 10 platforms when SM-6 would have been faster and cleaner. Acceptable cost. If he was right, and he had used SM-6 on the first wave, he would face the second wave with an exhausted outer ring and inadequate intercept probability in the middle ring against a larger or more capable salvo. Unacceptable cost. He had 90 seconds before the first contacts entered SM-2 range. He had already made the call. Running count, 11:51 p.m., second 434. 10 contacts, range 31 kilometers, 8 minutes elapsed. SM-6, 8 held. SM-2, standing by, first engagement window in 40 seconds. ESSM, 32 held. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Coastal radar sweep, active. Second wave, not yet detected. At 11:52 p.m., the Hawkeye called it. Second wave, 10 contacts, bearing 044, launch point approximately 3 kilometers north of first wave origin. Speed, 185 kilometers per hour. Altitude, 400 meters. Time to first wave launch, 7 minutes 50 seconds behind the lead wave. 8 minutes. The interval matched the March engagement pattern with a 20-second variation. The second wave was designed to arrive as the first wave was being cleared at middle ring range. Third wave, the Tao asked. No additional contacts from coastal area at this time. That answer lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Third wave, 10 contacts, bearing 041, launch point matching first wave origin. Speed, 210 kilometers per hour. Altitude, 200 meters descending. Third wave is faster than first two, 30 platforms. 3 waves at 8-minute intervals. First wave at middle ring range now. Second wave at outer ring range. Third wave just launched faster than the others, lower altitude. The third wave was the payload. The first two were the key. The design was now fully visible. The adversary had launched the third wave from the same grid as the first wave. They had repositioned and reloaded at the same site during the engagement window, a logistics operation completed in 16 minutes. The third wave's higher speed and lower altitude were not coincidental. Lower altitude degraded radar tracking. Higher speed compressed the engagement timeline at every ring. The third wave had been optimized for penetration. The first 2 waves had been optimized for expenditure. 30 platforms total. $20,000 per Shahed-136 in current market estimates. Total adversary investment, $600,000. 3 launch teams, 1 truck per team, a 16-minute reload cycle, and a pattern of engagement that had been refined through 11 months of operational testing against live U.S. defensive systems. They had tested this doctrine against real ships. They had collected real engagement data. The third wave reflected what they had learned. SM-2 cells 1 through 6 engaged the first wave at 31 kilometers. 6 launches in 2.8 seconds, 5 intercepts. 1 miss, the contact descended to 120 meters between track updates, radar return merging briefly with surface clutter before reacquiring. Remaining first wave, 5 contacts at 28 kilometers. SM-2 cells 7 through 11. 5 launches, 4 intercepts. 1 miss, same descent profile, same clutter issue. First wave, 1 contact remaining at 23 kilometers. ESSM Cell 1 against the final first wave contact at 19 kilometers. Intercept at 17 kilometers. First wave, 10 contacts, 10 neutralized. Cost 11 SM-2, 1 ESSM. Running count, 11:56 p.m., second 738. Wave 1, 10 neutralized. Wave 2, 10 contacts at 42 kilometers. Wave 3, 10 contacts at 68 kilometers, speed 210 kilometers per hour, altitude 200 meters descending. SM-6, 8 held. SM-2, 13 remaining. ESSM, 31. RAM, 21. CIWS 100%. Cost $13.7 million. 11 SM-2 at $1.2 million. $13.2 million. 1 ESSM at $450,000. The second wave was now at 42 kilometers. Outer ring range. And the SM-6 was still cold. The TAO looked at the second wave track files. Same profile as the first wave. Same altitude, now at 380 meters, consistent throughout. Same speed, same uniform approach bearing. No deviation from the pattern established by the first wave. Either the second wave was identical in composition to the first, 10 Shahed-136 one-way platforms with real warheads, or it was 10 decoy platforms with radar reflectors and no warheads, designed to exhaust SM-2 inventory before the third wave arrived. He could not tell. The radar cross-section was identical. The flight profiles were identical. The only way to know was to intercept one and observe whether the warhead initiated on fragmentation. He would know which it was approximately 2 seconds after the intercept, when it was too late to change the engagement sequence. How many SM-2 remaining? 13, sir. 13 SM-2 against a second wave of 10, with a third wave of 10 behind it, faster, lower, with a shorter engagement timeline. He needed to neutralize the second wave efficiently enough to preserve SM-2 for the third. 10 contacts, 13 rounds at 75% hit rate. He needed at least 14 rounds to have confidence of clearing the second wave, and he had 13. Or he could use SM-6 on the second wave. 8 rounds, faster engagement, higher hit probability at range, clearing the second wave with inventory to spare and preserving SM-2 for the third. The cost, $16.8 million and an empty SM-6 magazine against what might be a decoy wave. The third wave was the question. The third wave was faster. The third wave was lower. If the third wave was the payload, it needed to face the outer ring, not the middle ring. If it faced only middle ring and inner ring, the math ran thin. SM-6, all 8. Second wave, fire. 8 cells in 1.4 seconds. 8 SM-6 rising from the deck into the night sky, booster plumes visible for 11 seconds before burnout. 8 tracks curving northeast toward 10 contacts at 39 kilometers. On the bridge, the SM-6 launches were visible as 8 sequential flashes from the VLS deck, not a detonation, a controlled event, but at 11 p.m. in a sector with no ambient light. The flashes reflected off the water, and for a moment the ship was visible from a long distance in every direction. 7 intercepts, 1 miss. The contact maneuvered at the moment of proximity fuse detonation, the fragmentation pattern missing by 4 meters. Second wave, 1 contact remaining at 29 kilometers. SM-2 cell 12 against the surviving second wave contact. Intercept at 24 kilometers. Second wave, 10 contacts, 10 neutralized. SM-6, 0 remaining. SM-2, 12 remaining. Running count. 12:06 a.m., second 1,337. First wave, 10 neutralized. Second wave, 10 neutralized. Third wave, 10 contacts. Range 61 kilometers, 210 kilometers per hour, altitude 180 meters and descending. SM-6, 0. SM-2, 12 remaining. ESSM, 31 remaining. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Cost to this point, $32.2 million. Time elapsed, 22 minutes. The outer ring was empty. The third wave was at 61 kilometers. At 210 kilometers per hour and descending, it would reach SM-2 engagement range at 40 kilometers in approximately 11 minutes. It would reach ESSM range at 20 kilometers 6 minutes after that. It would reach CIWS range in 28 minutes total from now. The third wave was not identical to the first 2. The altitude was 180 meters and continuing to descend. The speed was 210 kilometers per hour, faster than the first wave's 195 and the second wave's 185. The lateral spacing between contacts in the formation had increased from the first 2 waves, from approximately 180 meters average spacing to 310 meters. The wider spacing meant the radar had to track contacts across a broader arc, increasing dome rotation requirements for CIWS and increasing the minimum time between sequential ESSM engagements. It had also changed its approach bearing. Third wave was inbound on 041, 3 degrees south of the first 2 waves. The change put the approach arc partially behind the ship's forward centerline, requiring CIWS forward to rotate further aft than optimal engagement geometry. Not a disabling constraint. A friction cost. Every fraction of dome rotation time was a fraction of a second the contact used to close. And the platform that emerged from the Hawkeye track files as Contact 7 in the third wave had a different thermal signature on flare, slightly hotter than the others. The FLIR operator called it at 12:08 a.m. Contact 7 in Wave 3 has elevated thermal output relative to the other contacts. Could be a different engine variant. Could be a larger payload. Can't confirm from this range. A larger payload in the third wave. Confirmation that it was not a decoy wave. Everything the adversary had spent on the first 2 waves had been spent to reach this moment. A third wave of 10 platforms, one potentially carrying a significantly heavier warhead, approaching a ship with no SM-6, 12 SM-2, and ESSM as the primary layer. At 12:10 a.m., the third wave crossed 40 kilometers. SM-2 cells, 13 through 18. 6 contacts selected by track quality, the cleanest files at 38 to 41 kilometers. 6 launches. 4 intercepts. 2 misses. The third wave's lower altitude was degrading track quality faster than the previous 2 waves. Altitude now 110 meters. Radar return at this altitude against sea background was marginal. Both misses were contacts that had descended below 100 meters in the terminal engagement phase. 4 contacts remaining at 32 kilometers. Running count. 12:12 a.m., second 1,668. Wave 3, 7 contacts cleared. 3 remaining at 26 kilometers, sea skimming 80 meters. Contact 7, elevated thermal, still inbound. SM-6, 0. SM-2, 2 remaining. ESSM, 26. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Cost, $41.0 million. Time elapsed, 28 minutes. SM-2 cells, 19 through 22. 4 launches, 3 intercepts, 1 miss. Third wave, 3 remaining contacts at 26 kilometers. Contact 7, the elevated thermal signature, was among the 3. Running count, 12:13 a.m., second 1,727. Third wave, 3 contacts remaining at 26 kilometers, sea skimming at 80 meters. Contact 7, elevated thermal profile. SM-6, 0. SM-2, 2 remaining. ESSM, 31. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Cost, $41.0 million. Time elapsed, 29 minutes. 2 SM-2 remaining. 3 contacts at 26 kilometers and closing at sea. Skimming altitude. The SM-2 was rated to engage contacts at 80 meters altitude, but track quality at that altitude in this sea state was marginal. The TAO held the last 2 SM-2s for Contact 7 specifically, the elevated thermal signature, the potential heavier payload. ESSM cells 2 through 5 against contacts 3 and 9 of the third wave, the 2 contacts without the elevated thermal signature at 21 and 22 kilometers. 2 ESSM per contact. 3 intercepts from 4 rounds. 1 miss, contact 9 executing lateral evasion inside 15 kilometers, banking 30 degrees right and left in a randomized sequence. Reacquired at 17 kilometers. ESSM cell 6 fired, intercepted 14 kilometers. Third wave, 1 contact remaining. Contact 7, elevated thermal signature, altitude 65 meters, speed 210 kilometers per hour, range 18 kilometers. The last 2, SM-2 against Contact 7, at maximum range. 2 launches. First SM-2, miss, track degraded at 65 meters altitude, radar lost contact for 1.8 seconds. SM-2 passed 9 meters to the right. Second SM-2, detonation within 2 meters of the contact. Proximity fuse fragmentation pattern at optimal intercept geometry. The drone's wing structure fragmented. The airframe entered an uncontrolled descent. The payload did not initiate. Contact 7 impacted the water 11 kilometers from the hull. The payload, later assessed from debris recovery to be a 55-kilogram thermobaric warhead, significantly heavier than the standard Shahed-136 fragmentation charge, detonated on water impact. The shockwave was detectable on the ship's seismic sensors at 11 kilometers. The surface detonation sent a brief column of water 40 meters in height, visible through the FLIR camera, as a white thermal bloom. Running count, 12:16 a.m., second 1929. Third wave, 10 neutralized. All 30 contacts neutralized. SM-6, 0. SM-2, 0. ESSM, 26 remaining. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. No hull impacts. Total cost, $41.3 million. Time elapsed, 32 minutes. Running count, 12:16 a.m., 2nd, 1929. All waves complete. Total contacts, 30 neutralized. SM-6, 0. SM-2, 0. ESSM, 26 remaining. RAM, 21 unused. CIWS, both mounts 100% unused. 0 hull impacts. Total cost, $41.3 million. Time elapsed, 32 minutes. All 30 contacts were neutralized. No hull impacts, no structural damage. The ship was operationally intact. The silence that followed was different from the silence after the 2 previous waves had been cleared. Those silences had been transitional. The engagement was not over. The next wave was already in the picture. The tactical situation was still resolving. This silence was terminal. The radar was clean. The Hawkeye confirmed no additional contacts from the launch corridor. The engagement was complete. The crew had been at battle stations for 32 minutes. Nobody moved for approximately 15 seconds after the final intercept assessment was confirmed. In that 15 seconds, the adrenaline load of 32 minutes of continuous weapons employment began its chemical transition from resource to liability. The weapons officer set down the authorization panel. The FLAR operator leaned back from the display. In CIC, the watch team stayed at their stations because battle stations was still set. But the posture changed from active tracking to passive monitoring, and the difference was visible in every compartment. The damage assessment was clean. No damage, no personnel injuries. The hull, sensors, and propulsion were all fully operational. The ship had defended against 30 platforms in 3 coordinated waves over 32 minutes and had not sustained a single impact. The magazine assessment was not clean. SM-6, 0 of 8. SM-2, 0 of 24. ESSM, 26 of 32 remaining. RAM, 21 of 21 not used. CIWS, both mounts fully loaded, not used. The outer ring was completely empty. Both long-range interceptor types, the most capable and most expensive defensive weapons in the ship's inventory, were fully expended. If a 4th wave launched in the next 4 days, the ship had ESSM, RAM, and CIWS only. Against a Shahed-136 at sea-skimming altitude in marginal sea state, ESSM hit probability was rated at 68%. Against a faster platform or a heavier warhead variant, lower. Against a sequenced wave of 10 contacts designed to exploit the outer ring being gone, the math ran differently than it had tonight. The adversary had spent $600,000. The ship had spent $41.3 million. Exchange ratio 69-1 in the adversary's favor. The TAO walked the magazine assessment a second time and then a third. 8 SM-6, 24 SM-2, 32 intercepts in total at the outer and middle rings. 27 of 28 SM-6 and SM-2 launches had resulted in intercepts, a 96.4% success rate across the engagement. The one surviving first wave contact, the one surviving second wave contact, and the surviving third wave contacts had all been cleared by ESSM before reaching CIWS range. By every professional metric, the engagement had been executed with precision. The outer ring was still empty. He had spent $16.8 million in SM-6 on the second wave because the tactical logic was sound. The second wave needed to face the outer ring, not the middle ring, and the third wave needed to face a ship with a working SM-2 inventory rather than a depleted one. The call was correct. The math was also $16.8 million in SM-6 expended against what turned out to be 10 standard Shahed-136 platforms, none of which carried heavier payloads. The heavy payload had been in the third wave. He had spent the most expensive interceptors on the intermediate threat. There was no way to know that at the time. That was the point. The adversary's design had created a decision structure in which every rational response was also a costly one. Hold SM-6 on the second wave, use SM-2, preserve the long-range inventory, and risk the third wave facing a depleted middle ring with only ESSM and CIWS remaining against sea-skimming contacts, including a 55-kilogram thermobaric warhead. Use SM-6 on the second wave, clear it efficiently, preserve SM-2 for the third wave, and spend $16.8 million against platforms that turned out not to be the primary threat. Both choices cost. The adversary had designed it so that both choices cost. They had spent $600,000 building a decision problem that forced a $41 million response to either branch. The supply officer assembled the final accounting at 2:30 a.m. His numbers required no interpretation. They were complete. Adversary expenditure: 30 Shahed-136 one-way attack platforms at $18,000 to $22,000 per unit. One platform with thermobaric warhead modification. Additional cost estimate $8,000 to $15,000. 3 launch vehicles with positioning crews, consumables, and logistical support. Estimated $80,000. Total adversary investment in the engagement: approximately $680,000. U.S. interceptors: 8 SM-6 at $2.1 million to $16.8 million. 24 SM-2 at $1.2 million to $28.8 million. 6 ESSM at $450,000 to $2.7 million. Total, $48.3 million. Counting the 2 SM-2 fired against Contact 7 in the third wave and the additional ESSM, total expenditure $41.3 million confirmed. Exchange ratio 69-1. 69 US dollars spent for every 1 adversary dollar. Emergency resupply request transmitted at 1:44 a.m. SM-6 priority. SM-2 priority. Expected resupply ETA from the logistics vessel on station. 3 days for partial reload, 5 days for full inventory restoration. The ship would patrol this corridor for 3 days with no SM-6, no SM-2, and 26 ESSM. The corridor it was protecting had been declared the highest risk maritime zone on the planet by every insurer that wrote coverage for it. The adversary launched from reload positions they had repositioned twice in 11 months. They could reload the third wave's launch site within approximately 6 hours based on observed logistics tempo. They had 6 hours to reload. The ship had 3 days before partial resupply. That asymmetry, 6 hours versus 3 days, was not an intelligence failure. It was a structural feature of land-based logistics versus at-sea replenishment. The adversary had a road. The ship had an ocean. The road was faster. Engagement summary. Red Sea Patrol Sector, 11:44 p.m. to 12:16 a.m. Wave 1, 10 Shahed, 136 platforms. Neutralized 10. Interceptors 11 SM-2, 1 ESSM. Wave 2, 10 Shahed, 136 platforms. Neutralized 10. Interceptors 8 SM-6, 1 SM-2. Wave 3, 10 Shahed, 136 platforms, including 1 thermobaric variant. Neutralized 10. Interceptors 5 SM-2, 6 ESSM, 2 SM-2 on Contact 7. All 30 contacts neutralized. 0 hull impacts. 0 personnel injuries. 0 structural damage. Magazine status post-engagement: SM-6, 0 of 8. SM-2, 0 of 24. ESSM, 26 of 32. RAM, 21 of 21, unused. CIWS, both mounts fully loaded, unused. Outer ring, fully expended. Total adversary cost, approximately $680,000. Total U.S. munitions expended, $41.3 million. Exchange ratio, 61-1 in the adversary's favor. Emergency resupply ETA, 3 days partial, 5 days full. Adversary relaunch capability from observed logistics tempo, 6 hours. The ship was intact. The outer ring was not. In the gap between those two sentences, the adversary had already begun to reload.